CBS News political contributor and good enough to join us from Washington. And Mark, let's begin there. As Donald Trump continues to outright reject that is put forth by U.S. intelligence in refusing to acknowledge Russia's involvement in these hacks, what do you make of it all?
Well, I mean, it's sort of a dangerous game he's playing, because in a few weeks or maybe a month or so, he's going to be in charge of these intelligence operations, and he's going to be briefed by them, or he's going to be talking to them, and they're going to be under his watch. So the question is, when he actually is in charge of this, what will his posture be then? I mean, right now he's sort of turning this into a kind of a blame thing, a political sort of framework. But the fact is, the people who are putting this out presumably have a lot of information on this as they've been working with. So, look, I mean, I think it right now will sort of work in a political context, but when he's in charge, it's a very, very different thing.
Well, in perhaps this specific political context, but another context does loom, the confirmation hearing of Rex Tillerson. How will this frame that?
Well, it will frame it quite a bit. I mean, I think, his ties to Russia when he was head of Exxon, or as head of Exxon, and, the ongoing, investigation into what Russia's role was into these hacks. It seems to be fairly wide consensus across the government that they were behind this. I mean, he's going to get a lot of questions about it. He's going to get a lot of questions about his relationship with Putin. I assume he'll be getting more questions about things related to Russia than anything else. So, to me, this is front and center. His confirmation hearings are going to be putting that on the front page every single day. And it sort of ensures that this issue looms certainly for as long as his confirmation goes on, and that's going to be a pretty big fight.
It is a tenuous majority, albeit a majority for the GOP in the Senate. What are you hearing about how this hearing will go?
Well, it's going to be very direct. I would be very, very shocked if it was hands off. I think you've already had a number of Republicans who have been pretty vocal about their contention that Russia is a very serious subject. This hack is a very serious subject. Again, that goes right to Tillerson, Lindsey Graham, John McCain, even Mitch McConnell indirectly have stated that they have concerns about this. So yeah, I assume he'll be ready. He'll be briefed completely. I do think that will be the central issue of his confirmation.
Mark, today we were supposed to see a press conference where Donald Trump was going to discuss his business dealings and conflict of interest that may present themselves as well. Now, these questions, though, are resurfacing today after Mr. Trump's adult children sat in on that tech summit at Trump Tower yesterday. I'm going to play a bit of what Kellyanne Conway, his senior advisor, had to say about that and get your thoughts on the other side.
Anything short of him never talking to his adult children again won't satisfy some of his critics, and there are many out there. So let's be fair. They're going to continue to be his children, that I guarantee you. And I find all this hand-wringing over who was in that meeting yesterday to be really over the top. The meeting was so transparent. You've seen clip after clip, excerpt after excerpt. It's all been reported this morning. It was quite transparent and open. There was nothing secretive about it.
Perhaps a reaction we would expect from Kellyanne Conway, but is this hand-wringing, as she put it, over the top?
No, it's not at all. It's a direct conflict between his family business and the presidency he's putting together and the administration he's putting together and the meetings he's having. So, I mean, he said that there's going to be a disentanglement, and the fact is his kids are running the business and his kids were there. I mean, yes, you can say he's not allowed to talk to his children again. I mean, no one's saying that, but we're talking about a business relationship, and we're also talking about a pretty high-profile meeting with tech leaders, and yes, it was transparent, and we saw it all there, and I think there are a lot of questions that need to be answered.
CBS polling found that some 70% of Americans do believe that the transfer, as it has been suggested, of the business to his adult children will still represent a conflict of interest. And 70% in any poll is quite a number indeed. Do you have any sense, though, that it'll matter?
Well, it certainly will matter. I mean, I think it matters in terms of public opinion, but beyond public opinion, it matters in terms of the questions of who he and they are working for. I mean, obviously, as president, we would expect that his first priority would be to run the country and to look out foremost for the American interests. And if there's any question at all about his own enrichment, about the success of his own business, about the relationship that his kids are trying to build through their father's role, I mean, I think it's very, very legitimate. And it's not just public opinion. It's about, it's what Congress thinks, it's what his administration thinks, and it's ultimately about how this administration is going to run itself. So I think until there's a greater level of transparency than we've seen so far, these questions are going to persist.
Mark, the Twitter crosshairs of the president-elect were trained on Vanity Fair today.
Yes.
They join an illustrious and long list: Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Saturday Night Live, Hamilton, et al.
The New York Times. Don't leave us out.
I would never leave you out. Last but certainly not least.
Good.
Why engage?
I don't know. I mean, look, they would say that this is a new world, and you know, Twitter is his platform, and he seems to be doing this in lieu of a press conference or more standard press releases. I mean, I do, you know, give him some credit for using these new media to his advantage. Obviously, he's got a large following. I also think that there's a huge backlash potential here in that, one, as a practical matter, Vanity Fair, I assume, is banking all kinds of new subscriptions today, probably getting a lot more attention to their website and to the Hive, the newsletter that they seem to be bent out of shape about, than they had before. So I think this can certainly be a boon to their readership and their business. But it's also the kind of thing that people will wonder after a while, is this the kind of thing the president-elect or ultimately the president should be concerning himself with, especially when he has taken a fairly you know, cavalier, you could say, approach to intelligence briefings and things like that. So, I mean, it does sort of set up a scenario where, you know, when he is in charge and things start happening, people will have that kind of ammunition to ask questions about, you know, what he's actually doing, what his priorities are, and what he's concerning himself with.
And Mark, interestingly, he will proudly quote his the number of his millions of Twitter followers. He clearly sees the cultural impact of the medium, as you just put it, and yet, for reasons either unknown or not agreed upon, Twitter's CEO was not at that tech summit yesterday. What'd you make of the various reports?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there are conflicting reports. I mean, the Trump people say that it was just a question of space at the table. You know, the other narrative is that this was done out of spite because of a disagreement they had over a logo during the campaign that Twitter wasn't going to use. Yeah, I mean, it is sort of interesting. I mean, obviously the backstory is the crux of this, but it would seem unusual that I mean, you could on one hand say that Trump is maybe biting the hand that feeds him, because that is, you know, genuinely, you know, really at the core of his messaging strategy right now. On the other hand, it's probably good for business for Twitter also. I mean, they, you know, get a lot more subscribers, a lot more, you know, users, and I don't really know who this hurts. So, you know, obviously they didn't get to go to the meeting, which I assume hurt some feelings, but I think that this will be, you know, we'll see what they do going forward. I mean, if Twitter actually takes some kind of action to manage Donald Trump's account in a more aggressive way, that'll be interesting, because he is the president-elect of the United States. But stay tuned.
Well, I would stay tuned for that, to be sure.
Stay tuned.
I want to get you out of here on this one, because also I guess it's another way of talking about the relative thick or thinness of the president-elect's skin. And I know you recently sat down with Minnesota Senator Al Franken. It was a wide-ranging interview. What struck you about it?
Well, Al Franken is an interesting character. I mean, I started following him around in July. He struck me as kind of you know, he's a former comedian. He was on Saturday Night Live for decades. He was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2008, certified in 2009. He has been very, very serious as a senator. He has been very, very conscientious about not being a jokester, not being the comedian that everyone knew him for, at least publicly. I think now, as a member of the opposition party, at a time when political comedy is at this crossroads, because Donald Trump, in a way, served as a better punchline than anything a comedian could come up with during the campaign, and reality came around. You know, they actually justified everything, and you know, the absurdity became the norm, who became the president. And so it is a bit of a, I mean, there's a lot of existential hand-wringing, there's that word again, about comedy and what the role is when Donald Trump is in the White House. But Al Franken, I think, will be taking a more vocal role. He's a fascinating guy. He's had a fascinating life, and I thought it'd be sort of interesting to sort of see his kind of askew take on the world right now. And yeah, it's in the Sunday magazine. Everyone should read it immediately, and if Donald Trump tweets about it, more people will probably read it.
By the millions and millions. Mark Leibovich.
By the millions, yeah.
As always, we appreciate the insight.
Thanks, Josh. Always fun.